Chat now to educational psychologist Jessie Ann Bird. She's from the Educational Psychology Association of South Africa. Jessie Ann, good morning, good afternoon, and thanks so much for your time. And I suppose, yes, we've had, you probably heard that comment coming through from SADC saying it's a very, very emotional time. In the best of years, I mean, a lot of pupils struggle with this time of year. They struggle with expectations and sort of feelings of failure as well, depending on what results they give. I think just focusing on the type of conditions and what conditions this particular batch of matriculants had to write under, what would be your advice to first the pupils and then their parents?
Sure. You know, I think looking at 2020, I mean, I can't imagine writing matric in 2020. If we think about what we need to write a matric exam successfully, you know, we need support, we need continuity, we need correct environment to study for our exams, we need to be on top of our curriculum. And I think for many of our matrics, I mean, that just wasn't really possible last year. And so I think we've got to hold in mind that there's a huge amount of anxiety that's just coming forward from 2020 and all of those circumstances. And that coupled with the more typical anxiety of expecting one's matric exams, I think we just need to normalize that firstly and to know that this is expected to be hard and it's okay to feel like it's a struggle. I also think that many people will not get the results they were hoping for, and that might not be their fault, and that we need to remember that there are second chances and that there are alternatives to look at. And I think it's also really important that we remind parents and teachers of that too.
Yeah, Jessie Ann, and I think it's also very important to focus on, you know, sort of adapting to what's going to happen after this, adapting your life and your plans and your expectations to the results that will come out, and they will get their specific results by tomorrow. We heard the department say there. And also what plans you might have had for your future, what further study plans you might have made that might not be possible now if you didn't get the results. So I think it's also very important for us to prepare those pupils for that they might have to have or make a change of plan.
I think you said something very important there. It might not be possible now, and I think to emphasize it might not be possible right now, but it might be possible a little bit later on. You know, this might not be that your dream might never come true. It just might be a little bit delayed, and you might need to take a little bit of a detour to get there. You know, we spend so much time emphasizing matric results. And I think for many South Africans, yeah, they might be the first in their family to get matric. There might be all this pressure that sometimes it's hard to think about what else there might be afterwards, you know, after that final grade 12 year. And the reality is this is just a first step towards adulthood and independence. And, you know, that sort of road can take many twists and turns, but there are different ways to get to where you're going.
And I think how all of this will be possible, Jessie Ann, is for these pupils, these parents, and yes, these teachers as well, to actually understand the context of what they've actually come through, what they've had to deal with to actually get here. I mean, when we're stuck in that mindset and burning the candle at both ends and, you know, just getting it done, just getting that exam done, getting it over with, we might forget the context in which we've had to do this or which they've had to do this. And I think just highlight that for us is that little talking to they're going to have to give themselves to say, listen, you did this, but understand what you did it in the middle of.
You know, I think for a lot of us, and I think especially you know, for some of our adolescents, 2020 was spent in survival mode. And now if we think about what survival mode really is, it's when our bodies and our brains are conserving resources just to live. And, you know, our brains were evolved in a different time period where, you know, your resources needed to go towards finding food, they needed to go towards keeping you alive, identifying dangers. They weren't necessarily evolved to studying towards an examination. And so when you have something like a pandemic come into play, that will rob you of your cognitive resources because your brain and body want to keep you alive. And so I can only imagine it would be incredibly difficult to study in a situation like that. And I think especially for many of our matrics whose families were very likely going through severe financial constraints, that would have just been emphasized as well.
And I think also, and now that you mentioned that, Jessie Ann, is also a lot of those parents might also not be able to fulfill their sort of further education study promises to their children to say, I was going to send you here. Things have changed in the past year. I'm not going to be able to afford this. And that might be, even though the child has the results to move on to that phase, the parents might not be able to meet that expectation. And I think for the sake of the family dynamic as well, it's important to address that.
Oh, absolutely. I think 2020 and the COVID-19 pandemic, it has really emphasized the financial inequalities that we see in our country. And fortunately, those that were struggling before, I think will be struggling even more now. And I think that this indicates that we really have a need to better support our learners and to make sure that they've got their options. We have a huge amount of potential in South Africa, and we really need to look at how do we support people, how do we help people reach that potential, especially when we have circumstances completely outside of their control that could curtail their futures.
All right, thanks very much. That's Jessie Ann Bird. She's from the Educational Psychology Association of South Africa. Very important to remember the context and amid which all of this is happening at the moment. Still to come up here.